Now we're in Revelations chapter 1, verse 5. Reading from the King James Bible, quote, "And from Jesus Christ, who is the faithful witness, and the first begotten of the dead, and the prince of the kings of the earth, unto him that loved us and washed us from our sins in his own blood." Now let's look at the Greek and parse this out. And from Jesus Christ, who is the faithful. That phrase, who is the faithful, is only used one time, and it's right here. Witness and the first begotten. Now the phrase, and the first begotten, is also unique in the King James Version. This is the only time it's used. Okay, seeking a definition for this. Who was the Son of God long before those who by his agency and merits are exalted to the nature and dignity of the sons of God, with the added suggestions of the supreme rank by which he excels these other sons. And this definition uses several scriptures for comparison. Psalms 89 verse 28, King James Version, quote, "My mercy will I keep for him forevermore, and my covenant shall stand fast with him," unquote. Exodus 4:22, King James Version, quote, "Thou shalt say unto Pharaoh, Thus saith the Lord, Israel is my son, even my firstborn." Jeremiah 38 verse 9, "My Lord the King, these men have done evil in all that they have done to Jeremiah the prophet, whom thou hast cast into the dungeon. And he is like to die for hunger in the place where he is, for there is no more bread in the city." Jeremiah 31:9, King James Version, "They shall come with weeping and with supplications. Will I lead them? I will cause them to walk by the rivers of waters in a straight place, wherein they shall not stumble, for I am a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn." And again in Romans 8:29, King James Version, quote, "For whom he did foreknow, he also did predestinate to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren." Okay, so then they have also Hebrews 12:23, King James Version, quote, "To the general assembly and church of the firstborn, which are written in heaven, and to God the judge of all, and to the spirits of just men made perfect," unquote. Now what I have learned from researching out this first begotten is that it's also a sort of kind of a mystery. But what I know is that we are to be more like Christ, and therefore who he is in completion we will know when we get there. Until then, he is due every honor and every praise possible for changing each one of us and giving us the forgiveness of sins through his sacrifice on the cross. Now let's continue on. Of the dead. Now the phrase "the dead," it's used well over 150 times in the King James Version. And the prince of the kings of the earth. Now all those phrases, the prince of the kings of the earth, those are general terms that are used numerous times in the King James. Unto him that loved. Now let's take a look at that. That is used one time, and it's right here. And let's parse that out. That is written in an aorist tense, active voice, participle mood. Aorist tense, it's concerned with the action with no regards to past, present, or future. The active voice means that the subject is being done by the doer, the performer of the action. And the principal mood means that it's an ing or ed. Unto him that loved. So there's your ed. Us and washed. Let's parse out washed. That's being done in the aorist tense, active voice, participle mood. So staying with the same as in this verse already. Aorist is concerned with the action of the verb, no looking at past, present, or future. Active, it's being done by the doer, the performer, and it's an ing or ed as far as that goes, and this one's an ed, washed us from our sins and his own blood. There's not much here. It's pretty plain to see. So let's go ahead and go to John Gill's commentary on the Bible and read what he has to say on it. Okay. Quote, and from Jesus Christ, unquote, who, though the second person in the Trinity, is mentioned last, because many things were to be said of him, and who is described in all his offices, in his prophetic office. Quote, the faithful witness, as he is of his Father, of his mind and will, with respect to doctrine and worship, of his truth and faithfulness in his promises, and of his love, grace, and mercy to his chosen, and of himself, of his true deity, proper sonship, and perfect equity with the Father, of his messiahship, and of salvation through his obediency, sufferings, and death, and of all truth in general, to which he has bore a faithful testimony several ways, in his ministry, by his miracles, at his death, and by the shedding of his blood to seal it, by his Spirit, since, and by the ministers of his word, he is described in his priestly office by, quote, the first begotten of the dead, unquote, being the first that rose from the dead by his own power into an immortal life. For though some few were raised before him, yet not by themselves, nor to live forever, but to die again. Moreover, he is the firstfruits of the resurrection, the pledge, the earnest of it, as well as the efficient cause and exemplar of it. This character supposes that he died as he did for the sins of his people, and that he rose again from the dead, as he did for their justification, and that he rose first as their head and representative, and opened the way of life for them. And he is described in his kingly office, for it follows, quote, and the prince of the kings of the earth, unquote, which is not to be understood figuratively of the saints who have power over sin, Satan, and the world, through the efficiency grace of Christ, and of whom he is prince or king, but literally of the kings and princes of this world, over whom Christ is king and Lord, he who receives their crowns and kingdoms from him, and rule by him, and are accountable to him, as they one day must be. Next follows a doxology, or an ascription of glory to him. Quote, unto him that hath loved us, unquote, his own, his people, his church, his chosen, and who are given him by his Father. These he has loved with an everlasting and unchangeable love, with a love of complacency and delight, which passes knowledge and will never end, and which he has shown in espousing their persons, undertaking their cause, assuming their nature, and in nothing more than in giving himself for them as a propitiatory sacrifice, or in dying and shedding his precious blood for them, as is next expressed, quote, and washed us from our sins in his own blood, unquote, which shows that these persons were loved before washed. They were not first washed and then loved, but first loved and then washed. Love was the cause of washing, and not washing the cause of love. Hence it appears that they were in themselves filthy and unclean through sin, and that they could not cleanse themselves by anything they could do, and that such was the love of Christ to them, that he shed his precious blood for them, which is a fountain opened to wash in for sin, and which cleanses from all sin. This is to be understood, not of the sanctification of their natures, which is the work of the Spirit, but of atonement for their sins, and justification from them, by the blood of Christ, whereby they are so removed that they are all fair and without spot. It is afterwards said that these same persons are made priests, and it may be observed that the priests were always washed before they performed the service as such. The Alexander copy and the Syriac and Arabic versions read, quote, "and hath loosed us from our sins in," unquote, or, quote, "by his blood," unquote, that is, from the guilt of them, which was bound upon them. This ends the commentary of John Gill on Revelations chapter 1, verse 5. Thank you for listening to Discovering the Scriptures.